Gemini 3.6 Flash, and Claude Opus 5 just went head-to-head, and the gap in raw coding ability is real. On SWE Bench Pro, Opus 5 scored 79.2% against Flash's 58.7%, a 20-point difference on the exact same benchmark. Both models dropped in 2026, and teams are picking sides right now, so the timing matters. We're running Gemini 3.6 Flash against Claude Opus 5 across 4 real tests: long context reasoning, coding, pricing, and multimodal drawing on 12 verified sources with no vendor spin. Model the right choice for your stack. One of these two has a pricing structure that could flip your whole decision, and it's the one most people are glossing over. Who is this for? Developers picking a model for production code, teams running high-volume API calls, anyone building agents that need to read long documents or handle audio and video. Your choice here affects your bill, your accuracy, and how much setup work you have to do, and the differences are substantial. Test 1 is long context document reasoning. If you're building something that reads a 1,000-page legal brief or pulls answers from a giant codebase, context window size is the whole game. How much can each model actually hold at once? And does it stay accurate when the window fills up? Claude Opus 5 ships with a 1 million token context window, and Anthropic claims it holds accuracy across the full window, which was a known weak spot in Opus 4.8. On Deep Search QA, Opus 5 ranks at the top, though that's a vendor claim with no numeric score attached. Gemini 3.6 Flash has no published context window size and no accuracy benchmark, making this a one-sided data situation. Claude Opus 5 takes test 1 on the strength of a published 1 million token window, while Gemini 3.6 Flash has no number on the board. Score is Gemini 3.6 Flash 0, Claude Opus 5 1. When one side won't publish the data, you can't give them the point. This result is not a clean knockout. Gemini 3.6 Flash did improve token efficiency by 17% over its predecessor, according to community-reported data, and it claims better long horizon understanding. The gap might be smaller in practice, but without published numbers to back that up, treat this one with some caution. Test 2 is coding task completion, the one developers care about most. Can the model write production code without hallucinating imports or breaking halfway through a complex task? SWE Bench Pro is the closest thing we have to a real-world coding test, and both models have published scores on it, so a direct comparison is possible. On SWE Bench Pro, Claude Opus 5 scored 79.2%, and Gemini 3.6 Flash scored 58.7%, a 20-point gap on the same test. Opus 5 also hit 96.0% on SWE Bench Verified, the highest figure in this whole research set. While Gemini has no published score there, on Frontier Bench, agentic coding, Opus 5 scored 43%, more than doubling its prior version, and Flash has no number published for that suite either. Claude Opus 5 takes test 2, leading on every coding benchmark where both models actually published a score. Running total, Gemini 3.6 Flash 0, Claude Opus 5 2. 2 tests in and Flash hasn't scored yet. And that's a real gap, not a rounding error. Gemini 3.6 Flash did score 49% on DeepSWE and 63.9% on MLE Bench, but Opus 5 has no published numbers for those suites, so they can't flip the verdict. Opus 5's Frontier Bench score of 43.3% sounds low on its own, but that benchmark is genuinely hard, and it more than doubled the previous version score. Test 3 is API pricing, and this is where the whole comparison can flip for a lot of teams. Running millions of tokens a day means cost per token is the budget, full stop. Both models have published API pricing. So this is a clean, direct comparison with real numbers on both sides. Gemini 3.6 Flash costs $1.50 per million tokens on input and $7.50 on output. Claude Opus 5 costs $5 on input and $25 on output, which is 3.3 times more expensive across the board. Opus 5 does offer a batch API at $2.50 and $12.50 per million tokens, plus cache reads at 50 cents, which could narrow the gap if your workload fits that pattern. Gemini 3.6 Flash takes test 3, coming in roughly 3 times cheaper per token on both input and output at standard rates. Score is now Gemini 3.6 Flash 1, Claude Opus 5 2, Flash is finally on the board, and this one isn't even close. Test 4 is multimodal input handling, which matters if your product needs to process audio, video, screenshots, or anything beyond plain text. More and more real workflows involve mixed inputs, and a model that handles them natively without extra tooling is a lot easier to build on. So let's see what each model actually supports. Gemini 3.6 Flash accepts text, audio, images, video, and code natively and ships computer use as a first-party API tool with no Playwright or Selenium required. Claude Opus 5 takes text and images only, but scored 70.6% on OS World 2.0 for computer use and 59.4% on SWE Bench Multimodal. Flash has no published scores for those suites, so the benchmark side runs one direction. This test is a tie because Flash wins on input breadth and Opus 5 wins on published benchmark scores. And neither advantage fully cancels the other. Running score, Gemini 3.6 Flash 1, Claude Opus 5.2 with one tide. Both models do multimodal, just in very different ways. The right answer here depends entirely on what you're building. For audio or video processing, Flash is the only option right now. For proven computer use accuracy with a published score, Opus 5 has that number. Flash also has real enterprise deployments at Harvey and Hebia for document parsing, which shows it works in production even without a benchmark score to point at. Gemini 3.6 Flash wins on cost, full stop, at 3.3 times cheaper per token on input and output at standard rates. It accepts audio and video natively, which Opus 5 cannot do at all, and computer use is built in as a first-party API tool with no external browser automation stack. It also has confirmed production deployments at Harvey and Hebia for document-heavy workflows. Claude Opus 5 wins on raw coding ability and context depth, scoring 79.2% on SAUI Bench Pro versus Flash's 58.7%. A 20-point lead, 96.0% on SubDUI Bench Verified, the highest figure in this research, and its 1 million token context window is the largest verified here. OS World 2.0 at 70.6% gives it a published computer use score that Flash simply hasn't matched. Decision rule is straightforward. For high volume API calls, audio video processing, or tight token budgets, Gemini 3.6 Flash is the pick. For complex coding agents, a million token context window, or hard agentic tasks where accuracy is non-negotiable, Claude Opus 5 is the pick. Cost versus capability. That's the whole call.